I want to bring in Ron Insana, a financial journalist and publisher of the Message of the Market Substack. And Ron, you're already tracking some immediate consequences, the ripple effects economically of the president's remarks today. What's happening?
Well, CNBC is reporting now that European lawmakers have suspended the trade deal that the United States and the European Union reached back in July based on these threatened tariffs of 10%, escalating to 25% if the U.S. does not get control of Greenland. So we're already now starting to see a tit-for-tat exchange between the U.S. and the EU over this particular issue. And the EU also has additional tariff intentions should this proceed and go on for a prolonged basis, which would be tariffs on $108 billion of U.S. goods. Then they've got this so-called trade bazooka, in which they could effectively launch an embargo against U.S. products going into Europe. And beyond that, one of the Danish pension funds announced yesterday it was going to sell $100 million worth of U.S. Treasury bonds. Now, cumulatively, the European Union owns over $3.5 trillion of U.S. Treasury bonds, which is roughly about 10% of the U.S. national debt. If there were some sales of those that accelerated from this point, that would drive up U.S. interest rates, weaken the dollar. So they're already starting to play a little more hardball here with the suspension of the trade deal. We'll see where it goes beyond that, but it is getting increasingly tense. Now, interestingly enough, equity markets here in the U.S. are up after the president declined to use force to acquire Greenland. We've gotten back about half of yesterday's losses. But the Wall Street Journal is also reporting that we're moving military assets towards Iran. So on the one hand, there's the tension over Greenland, and then there's the unknown over what could happen in the Middle East. So this is extremely fluid on a variety of different fronts, and I suspect we'll see a lot of volatility in financial markets as a result. So
we're seeing the impact there. We're seeing the impact abroad with the just alliances that the U.S. has. Listen to what the president said about NATO, for example.
So other presidents have spent, whether foolishly or not, trillions and trillions of dollars on NATO and gotten absolutely nothing in return. We've never asked for anything. It's always a one-way street.
A one-way street. David Rothkopf, has it always been a one-way street for NATO? Have the Danes not given anything? What about after 9/11?
The Danes were among the first to respond after 9/11, the first to come to America's aid after we were attacked. The notion that NATO has given us nothing is so profoundly ignorant of the Cold War era, so profoundly ignorant of the threat that the Soviet Union posed and the fact that when the US and Europe came together, we counterbalanced them, and ultimately we defeated the Soviet Union in the Cold War. And had there been no NATO, that would not have happened. So Trump is ungrateful to the Danes, but he is also ungrateful to all of these allies because he has never understood the idea of an alliance, that we were not in NATO to help NATO. We were in NATO because it was in the United States' national interest to ally ourselves with other countries because that made us stronger. And Trump, in his entire public career, has never gotten this core fact. And now what he's doing, as a consequence of that and some animus he has long had towards Europe, is he's destroying it. He's destroying it from the inside out in a way that the Soviets and Putin could only dream of doing. And I think when you look at this day, you'll say it was a defeat for the US, it was a defeat for Europe, but it was a big victory for Putin and also for the Chinese.
David wrote, America has the strongest military in the world, but if we lose our alliance with NATO, is America more at risk?
I think it is. And I think, you know, in the modern world, economic relations matter also. The European Union is one of the largest trading partners with the U.S. Russia's economy is smaller than the economy of California. And there's an interconnectedness in terms of supply chains, and Americans just, you know, travel to Europe on tourism, and all of that. President Trump is sort of dismissing and ending today that basically Europe is a bunch of ungrateful people and the U.S. has done everything for Europe. So, again, and there's just, you know, so we're talking about a trade war. This agreement is now ending. There could be tariffs now. And all the recent studies have shown that a core claim of President Trump that foreign countries pay the tariffs that he is imposing. He's creating a trade war right now and more tariffs. Tariffs are actually going to be paid by American taxpayers. Higher costs to American consumers because of the approach President Trump is taking to Europe. Thanks to Europe and many other trading partners, but particularly Europe, the United States has had, decades of steady growth and prosperity. China's now a big player in that as well. But Europe is enormously important to the United States economically. So all of these ideas just sort of go back to 100 years ago, and we're just going to ignore the rest of the world and just, again, technology, trade, culture, and I say this over and over, like young Americans, young Europeans, young people over the world don't want to live in just some sort of sphere that involves their own, the Americas and nowhere else. That's just not realistic economically or politically or even technologically today.